morning, everybody. My name is Darren St. George. I am here this morning to talk about Sal's Chit Chat about Danny Kaye. We are certainly excited. Everyone, one last reminder, please make sure that your microphone is muted and your camera is off and your table and chairs are in their full upright position. We are also broadcasting over Facebook. So if you're on Facebook watching this and have any questions, feel free to add it in the chats. I'll be monitoring there and I'll be able to get your questions over to Sal. So without further ado, let's have the man of the hour. Sal, Dad, are you there?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. All right, just toggle your camera on and off one more time. Make sure that you're streaming video as well. Here we go. Yep, we're getting.
There we are.
And
Good morning, good morning, good morning. So great to see so many familiar names up there. A lot of people coming back. I really appreciate it. Today's going to be a fun show. I see what they're talking about with the hair, Darren.
Yeah, I know it's getting a little crazy, but that's what it decided to do.
We should take a survey. Would they like us to cut your hair live? Well,
that's
in a future program.
Yeah, I'm glad you're talking about this on the air and not, well, we were privately speaking 15 minutes ago. Yeah. That's good.
Anyway, well, we're here today to talk about Danny Kaye, one of my favorites. And what do you have set up for us right now, Darren?
So for Danny Kaye, we have your lecture ready. We have. Okay. I mean, we still have more people coming in as we speak.
Okay. Did you have a survey?
Of course I do. Yep, we have a poll. Let's start with the first one here. Everybody, if you haven't done polls before, you're going to see a little pop-up on the screen. And, oh, hello, Linda. And we're talking very important things. Aside from cutting my hair, take a look here. We're curious about Sal. This was a question he and I were debating, and I decided just to throw it out to the audience. Should Sal be wearing a blazer for these chit chats? Yes, he looks snazzy. Nope, it's casual around here, or whatever makes Sal comfortable. And whatever makes you comfortable is off to a strong lead with 81% of the votes. And holy cow, everyone is voting so quickly. So we're definitely all learning how this Zoom technology works, because everybody's hopping on board. This is fantastic. Yeah. So, Pop, you can wear whatever you want, or at least between a blazer or not a blazer, whatever makes you comfortable. That is the consensus.
Terrific. What's interesting about it, Darren, is whenever I do something live, I feel wearing a jacket, sometimes a tie, it's really essential. I kind of like it. It's old school. I understand that. But you know what? I think everybody in our room right now is old school. So they appreciate the jacket and the tie. So thank you, everybody. When we get back together in person, yes, I will be wearing the blazer. I will be wearing a tie on occasion. Thank you so much.
I just hope to start wearing pants again.
I see somebody just mentioned that they met Danny Kaye in New York City on 18th Street, and he gave him an autograph, and he was very cordial and very accommodating. I've heard that also about Danny Kaye with his fans. He was always very cordial and very accommodating. Let's get into it. Can we have the first slide, please, Darren? This is a quote from Michael Feinstein. And Michael Feinstein, you may remember seeing him. He's always on Turner Classic Movies as one of the hosts of the programs. He's a singer, and he's a terrific artist himself. And he said about Danny, he had natural comedic flair and the dancing grace of Fred Astaire. He could sing, be a conductor, a chef, a humanitarian. He was also a spectacular comedic actor and a great dramatic actor, and there's nobody to whom he could be compared with today. There's nobody who could do all of it today, which is true. It's absolutely true. Finding these types of performers who really, when you get down to it, no schooling, this is all natural within this man. He somehow knew how to make things happen, and we're going to go into that right now. Can we go to the first first slide, Darren? Because I want everybody to meet our very special guest as a young man. There he is, born in 1911. That's David Daniel Kaminsky. And for those that are knowledgeable about it, Kaminsky is the same last name as another great comedian, Mel Brooks. Only difference is Mel Brooks spells it with a Y, Danny spells it with an I at the end. He was the youngest of 3 boys, and his parents were from the Ukraine, Jacob and Clara. He was the only son that was born here in the United States. His 2 brothers were born in the Ukraine. When he was a kid, he always wanted to be a surgeon, believe it or not, and we'll get into that later on. Growing up, his mother passed away young. When he was very young, he was, I think he was 11 years old. He started going out getting all kinds of jobs into his teens. He was a soda jerk. He worked in an insurance investigator, office clerk. Got fired for almost everything. He was just not exactly office material. The best story about it is that he had a job at a dentist office. And his job was, whenever everybody left the office to go do their chores or have lunch, he had to man the telephones. What happened was, he kind of liked the sound of the drill. And he took the drill and he started carving pictures and his name and things like that into the wood in the office. Naturally, he got fired for that little indiscretion, but that was him. He was always mischievous and causing all kinds of little mishaps for himself. Next slide, please. Now, as he grew older, he started performing quite a bit, and he started out as just like Mel Brooks, a tumbler in the Catskills. But then he met up with these individuals, and they called themselves the 3 Terpsichoreans. And they were performers. They had their own act. The 3 of them worked together. Look how young they were. And it was Dave Harvey, Danny Kaye, and Kathleen Young. And this was 1933 when they got together. They started in Utica, New York. It's the first time he changed his name from Kaminsky to Danny Kaye. And here's an interesting thing. They were so popular that they were able to secure a tour in Japan. And they were going there for several months. And there was one instance when they were performing on stage, and there was a blackout in the theater, and the audience was getting a little bit antsy because it was so dark and all. Danny grabbed a flashlight, shone it on himself, and he started singing a cappella to keep everybody calm until the lights went back on. And he sang every song he could think of at that point. What I wanted to tell you, there's an interesting story when he was in Japan, and here it is. He went into a restaurant, and while he was in the restaurant, he just wanted chicken. He was tired of all the Japanese food. He just wanted to have a chicken dinner. And he was trying to convey this to the waiter who only spoke Japanese. So what does Danny do? He starts clucking like a chicken, and he starts making all kinds of sounds, flapping his arms like wings. And the waiter finally acknowledges he understands what he's saying. He goes in the kitchen and he comes back with 2 fried eggs. So that was the kind of thing. But what was interesting about it for Danny, this gave him the opportunity to start learning how to use facial gestures, physical comedy, because he was dealing with an audience who could not understand English. And that's where he developed all these great abilities of being a pantomimist and a great a comedian without words. That's where it all began. All right, if we can go to the next one. On the left side of the screen, that is Sylvia Fine at the Tamerman Hotel up in the Catskills, and she was working up there. They didn't meet there. They met at the Straw Hat Review. It was a show that was being produced in New York. Danny became part of it because he was starting to do all kinds of getting noticed with the work he was doing. He and Sylvia really hooked up when they were in the Straw Hat Review. Shortly thereafter, that's when they got married. What happened was they they met in 1939. It was in 1940. Danny was working in Florida. He called her up and he said, I think it's time we got married. She came down to, I think it was Fort Lauderdale. They got married, and that was the beginning of their relationship. They had a daughter, Dina, who's still around, and she was born December 17, 1946. For those of you that love having dates in their lectures, they had a difficult time. And in 1947, they got married in 1940. In 1947, they split up. But 7 months later, they got back together again. They stayed as friends. They were still married, and they stayed that way until 1987. So they had a very, I don't even want to get into the personal side of Sylvia and Danny. The truth of the matter is she did outstanding work writing music for her husband. Incredible songs. And we're going to go to the next slide, because he appeared, he got noticed because of the things that she was doing. But then he got cast in Lady in the Dark in 1941. That's in 1941. And there was a song in that show written by Ira Gershwin. And essentially, it was naming famous Russian composers in under a minute. And the way he did it was that he challenged himself every time he did this performance to try to do it faster and faster and faster with each performance. After a while, the orchestra stopped working with him and let him do it a cappella because they couldn't keep up with how fast he was doing it. And we're going to let you hear it right now. Darren, can we click on, this is Tchaikovsky by Danny Kaye. Are we having trouble with the sound?
Here we go.
Tchaikovsky, I love Russian composer. There's Malachevsky, Rubinstein, Aretsky, and Tchaikovsky, Satelnikov, Dmitriev, Teresnik, Krishnanovsky, Vodovsky, Atabuchuk, Voreyushko, Artimenko, Soloviev, Prokofiev, Triumkin, Goreschenko, the Tinkler, Winkler, Bosniak, Rebekov, and Yusky, the Metro Balakir, Zolatore, Pekositsky, and Sokolov, and Popolov, Tukelski, and Konovsky, and Sokotovich, Borodinglier, and Novakovsky, the Liadov, and Hargan of Parkeris, Panchenko, and Darvimitsky, Chervachevsky, Riamin, Vasilyenko, Stravinsky, Nitsky, Kozakov, Putovsky, and Gretani, Novan, Vladonov, and Tezak, Mikhalini, Kamravana.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah.
That was a song that got him noticed. And from there, he was noticed by a gentleman named Sam Goldwyn. And Sam Goldwyn was always looking for new talent. Now, at this point in time, Sam Goldwyn in the 30s had a series of very, very successful movies with old banjo eyes. And if we go to the next slide, Darren, you'll see these are some of the films, just a few of them. That's Sam Goldwyn and Eddie Cantor in the middle. And these are just 3 of the movies that he made. The Goldwyn girls were part of Sam's programs. It was almost like he was doing his own version of the Ziegfeld Follies. And many, many stars, female stars, came out of being part of the Goldwyn girls. Paulette Goddard, Betty Grable, Virginia Gray, Jane Wyman, Ann Southern, and next week's guest, Lucille Ball, started out in that movie on the right, Roman Scandals, as one of the Goldwyn girls. We'll talk about that next time around. But Sam, at this point, with 10 years of having Eddie Cantor movies, was looking for somebody to take his place. He was looking for a young comic, somebody different, somebody that could not compare to Eddie, but take up the slack of what Eddie, because Eddie was moving on. He was doing other things. So we can go to the next slide.
Here, Dad, we do have a question though. Philip is curious, do you know which high school Danny attended? He's asking if you attended.
We're going to get into that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, we'll get into Danny.
And then very important, they're curious, the little pin on your jacket.
Oh, this?
Yes.
It's a Mickey Mouse American flag.
Yes, very important. Okay, good. Now we can proceed.
See it.
Yeah, we can see it. Yep, there it is. But we had questions about it.
Well, I'm glad you noticed. I got to tell you something about Sam Goldwyn. He was known for his Goldwynisms. Here's some of the things he would say. I don't think anyone should write his autobiography until after he's dead. He also said one of his things was include me out. He had purchased a book that he wanted to make a movie out of. It was called The Well of Loneliness. And they told him, Sam, you can't make a movie about that. It's about lesbians. And he said, that's all right. We'll make them Hungarians. That was Sam Goldwyn. He was always saying things that were a little bit off kilter. Okay, next one. So he brings in Danny Kaye. Here's Danny in just a few of the movies that he made for Sam Goldwyn. You'll note that Virginia Mayo became one of his great co-stars. She was in quite a few of the movies that he made. What was interesting, if you look at the Wonder Man and you look at Kid from Brooklyn, Up in Arms, Danny's hair was dyed blonde. Sam thought, oh, the red hair, people aren't going to like it. He said, dye your hair blonde. Danny did it. He also wanted him to have his nose fixed. He said, you look too Jewish. And Danny said, I'm keeping the nose. After he became a success with these movies, he let his natural hair come back again. And then we were able to see the Danny Kaye that we all remember and love. But it's funny how sometimes these movie moguls have something in their mind and they think it's going to be the right thing for them. By the way, that movie on the right, A Song is Born, is it's a remake of a great movie called Ball of Fire with Barbara Stanwyck and with Gary Cooper. And you should check that movie out. If you haven't seen Ball of Fire, one of the great comedies of all time. Okay, we can go to the next. Oh, just 1 second before you go. You can go back again. What I wanted to make a point on, yes, we're going to go into a lot of things about Danny, but I have an entire lecture about Danny Kaye where I go into all kinds of things about his personal life and everything else. Today, what I wanted to do was show you things about Danny that you may not know. Things that, at the beginning, I called him a Renaissance man. I've got to prove that, and I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to show you a series of moments from Danny Kaye that prove that he's undoubtedly one of the most talented guys that ever came out, one of the most talented performers that ever came. Boy, I hate when I say guys. It's so degrading. He's a terrific artist, and I'm saying, oh, he's a great guy. No, he's a terrific artist and a terrific showman. Let's go to the first slide. This was the hot ticket on Broadway in 1970. He was in a Richard Rodgers play called 2 by 2. And it didn't get great reviews, but it did get great reaction to Danny's performance. Everybody was highlighting Danny Kaye. Richard Rodgers was a little upset about it because they were ignoring his music and they were ignoring the story. But it was basically the story of Noah. That's really what it was all about. In the beginning of the performance, one of the performances, Danny broke his leg. What happened was he insisted on coming back. Here's one of the ads, Danny's back in the cast, which I thought is clever. And he continued working even though he was in a cast. If we can go to the next slide, there's a picture of him. There he is. You can see, there it is. There's his cast. And sometimes he would use crutches. Sometimes he would use a wheelchair, but he never missed a performance after that. He stayed with the show. And it ran for, I think it was about, let me just check on that. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, it ran for 10 months. So it was a successful show strictly because of Danny Kaye being in it. Okay. Oh, by the way, you may remember Madeline Kahn, who was in a lot of Mel Brooks movies. She was in Blazing Saddles, High Anxiety. She started out in this play, 2 by 2, with Danny Kaye in the cast. Okay, next slide. All right, so Danny was also a gourmet chef. We saw that he was a Broadway star. He was also a gourmet chef, and he specialized, he loved making Chinese food. He took his kitchen and he reconfigured it to put in there his woks and everything so that he could make Chinese food whenever he wanted. He was also very famous for his key lime pie, by the way. Here's an interesting about him. He invited 5 of the greatest French chefs to his home, and he was going to make them a gourmet meal, a great Chinese meal. And some of his friends said, "You're having 5 of the greatest gourmet chefs in your house? Aren't you nervous about it?" And he said, "No, what do they know about Chinese cooking? They're French." So he really saw things very differently. There was a quote I wanted to say about Danny. Besides being great in the kitchen, he despised people that were late for meetings, late on the set. He just had no tolerance for anybody being late. He refused to put himself on a pedestal because of his fame. He wasn't a snob, and he gave as much attention to the Queen or any of the royals as he would to the milkman that delivered to his house, which really reflects what that gentleman said earlier, that he met him and he was very kind. He was very kind to everybody. That's the way he was. But we'll get into that later on.
Here I have one more for you, actually, echoing that. Maureen wrote in, and she said, "In the 50s, I was taken to see Danny Kaye at the London Palladium, and remember that he stayed on the stage even after the band left until at least 1:30 in the morning."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, some people are born to be on the stage, and that's Danny Kaye. He loved his audiences. He loved his audiences. All right, the next one, this is kind of interesting. Besides being on Broadway, being a gourmet chef, he was an aviator, and he could fly just about any kind of aircraft. Here we have 3 different pictures of him in 3 different aircraft. How did he get into this? Glad you asked. When he started out in Hollywood, he had a friend of his who was a fellow actor. He never mentioned who the actor was, but he would pick him up all the time and drive him to the studio for the day shoot. But he was a horrible driver. And Danny, by the time he got there, his heart was in his mouth. The guy would run lights, and he would stop short, and he would tailgate. And Danny at one time said, trying to get a conversation going with him, "Do you have any hobbies?" And the man said to the other actor, said, "Yeah, I happen to be an aviator. I fly my own plane." And when Danny finished with him, he said to himself, "If that crazy man could be behind the wheel and fly a plane, I think I could do the same thing." And that's how he learned how to fly his own aircraft. But you could see, whenever he got involved with something, it was all in. There was no second guessing. He did everything he could to be the best pilot that he could be, the best chef he could be, the best on Broadway, the best concert artist. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, just mentioning him being a maestro. This is something that people are always, they always found it kind of interesting about Danny. He couldn't read or write music at all. Think about all the musicals he's been in, but he couldn't read or write music. He loved the idea of getting in front of an orchestra and conducting the orchestra. Think about some of the other comedians that we know that did the same thing, including Jerry Lewis. But this gentleman did it first. Now, he always had to add a little bit of a twist to it. In one of his bits was that he would throw away the baton and use a fly swatter when he was conducting the flight of the bumblebee. So he's Even when he was doing these concerts, he was still Danny Kaye. And you can see he took it serious, just like everything else. All the monies that they raised, he didn't take a dime for it. It was all donated to the musicians' pension funds, and all the money went back to that. Okay, let's go to the next. And he wasn't musically trained. The fact that he was able to do this is just incredible. Okay, next.
So, Pop, I have to tell you, my wife, Cassandra, she's over here. She can hear our conversation. She just had to leave the room laughing hysterical at the thought of conducting Flight of the Bumblebee with a fly swatter.
Yeah, that is so clever.
It is. It really is.
One of the things everybody remembers about Danny is that he was the very first celebrity ambassador for Unicef. Look at these pictures. He went around the world because of one thing, and he loved being with the kids. Why? Because he was a big kid himself. He always kept that sense of humor alive in him. And as we'll see as we go along, it doesn't matter how old he is. He loves being in front of an audience, especially if there's children involved. And he did everything he could to help these kids. He became the ambassador in 1954, and he received the French Legion of Honor in 1986 for the work that he did. He made UNICEF a known commodity. Nobody ever heard of it before then. It was he that brought it to the attention of the American people. I love these pictures of him with the kids. You can see how much fun they're all. He's having fun. You can see it in his face. Okay. Next one, please.
Nina is curious, was this something common for entertainers, American entertainers at the time, to be traveling abroad to Asia and so forth?
I don't think all. No, I do not. We did Some Like It Hot a couple of weeks ago. And in that one, I remember Joe E. Brown at the start, before World War II, he was already going overseas out of his own pocket, and he was paying to go in front and entertain all of our troops overseas. And he went from everywhere from Alaska to Guadalcanal, but that was out of his own pocket. There were some. The reason Bob Hope got into it, okay, we're going to get into now some other things. He was doing his radio show in Los Angeles at the time, and somebody said to him, Bob, would you be interested? We have an audience of servicemen. They're at one of the bases here in California. Would you mind coming and just bringing some of your people from your radio show and entertaining them? They would love to have entertainment. And he was reluctant at first, but he did it. And when he got there and he saw the reaction that he was hooked. And I guess it's the same thing with Danny. Once you get that taste of an audience laughing at everything you do and you're getting that applause, there was no stopping Bob Hope at that point. And the same thing with Danny. Once he got that taste of UNICEF and entertaining all those children from these impoverished countries, there was no stopping him. He continued on and on.
Gail said she had no idea that he was such a humanitarian, and Karen is curious, what did he do during the war?
I don't have anything on him in the war years. I really don't. I have a feeling he was making his movies at that point, so I don't know if he. I have to check into that for you. I'll check into it. No problem. Yeah. Okay. Next one. Now, here's a guy with very little education. He didn't have to go for acting classes. He didn't have to go for singing classes. He didn't have to go for dancing classes, but he's considered one of the great dancers on film. On the bottom, that's a clip from White Christmas with Vera Ellen. There he is doing ballet. On his TV show, he was always doing very extraordinary and difficult dance numbers, and that's why I wanted you to see this. Terrific performer. Who would have thought? Again, with no education, no training, he was able to do all these things. I don't know. I always wonder about that. How do these people, how do the great ones, whether it's Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton, Orson Welles, how do they know when they got in front of the camera what to do, how to do it? And Danny Kaye is another one of those. What background inspired him to think that he would be able to be a great dancer? He just believed in himself and he did it. He was able to do it. Next, please. Again, once he got involved with something, it was all in. There was no stopping him. And he loved baseball. And one of the things that he loved the Brooklyn Dodgers, Los Angeles Dodgers eventually. He recorded a song called the Dodgers song, and it ended up, and you can see it down there, that he had a hit record with that. It's still available on CD if you wanted to get Danny Kaye music. There's a lot of Danny Kaye music available at Amazon. I checked it out. You can get a lot of his songs on Amazon. He was the part owner of the Seattle Mariners. And let's see, what else is there? The rest of it, in terms of being part owner, I think he spent $6.2 million to become part of the team, part owner, manager. But again, he had an encyclopedia type of memory on all stats in baseball. He knew every game, he knew every player, he knew the World Series, he knew baseball inside and out. Interesting aspect of Danny Kaye, something that you may not have known about. Okay, next, please. Oh, who is Kaplan? This is an interesting little aspect of Danny Kaye that nobody knows in the public world. It's personal, it's private, it's something that he only did for friends. Danny might be at a party, and Jack Benny might say to him, he'd say, Kaplan, he would address him as Kaplan. He would say, Kaplan, why do you hate unions so much? And if he was up for it, all of a sudden, Danny Kaye would disappear and Kaplan would appear. And he would stay there for 2 hours in character. He would be a snob. He would be very pompous. And his whole character would change. That middle picture to me is what Kaplan looks like in my mind. He would be very, very snooty with everybody. But that's something that he only did for friends. He never did it for the general public. It was a character he created just for parties, just to entertain everybody at the parties. Oh, okay. Somebody just said they looked it up and he was turned down for military service. He had a bad back. Interesting. Thank you out there. I got my own traveling research team. Yeah. This is terrific.
Also, we have Nada and Bob. Apparently their mother, or his or her mother, lived on the same block on Bradford Street in East New York, Brooklyn. And when Danny was quite young, his mom used to yell out the window, it's Vildachi, which means crazy person in Yiddish.
He was. I love that Kaplan story because it's something that most people don't even know about. Okay, next one, please. What I want to go into right now are these are the four again, this is all personal, the 4 best Danny Kaye movies. And we're going to start in 1947. He made The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Again, there she is. Virginia Mayo is with him. Boris Karloff is in the movie. The Goldwyn Girls are in the movie. For those that remember it, if I say tapakada, 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 that was something that he used throughout the movie. What's interesting about this, it was written by James Thurber, and Thurber hated the movie. He hated the script, he hated the movie, he hated Danny Kaye. he said it bore no resemblance to the book he had already written. It was a very different type of movie. He said it was really a showcase for the talents of Danny Kaye. And he was absolutely right. And that's why the movie became a hit movie. And that's why that movie is even popular today. It was a showcase for Danny, and he excelled in the film. Good movie to watch. It's always on Turner Classic, as well as some of the others that we're about to see. I love the fact that Boris Karloff was in this movie because, again, as a villain, he played it straight, which was great because it played off of the comic attitudes and personality of Danny. So, terrific performance by Boris Karloff in that film. Next, please. Oh boy, this is one of everybody's favorite movies, Hans Christian Andersen. What I want you to do, this movie, it was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, Best Color Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Set Direction, Costume Design, Best Scoring for a Musical, and Best Song. And the music was written by Frank Lesser, who also wrote Baby It's Cold Outside, Two Sleepy People on a Slow Boat to China, Jingle, Jangle, Jingle. He also wrote a couple of Broadway shows you might remember, Guys and Dolls, and How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. This is the song that was nominated for Best Song of the Year. If you would click on that, Darren.
We can play a moment of it, but we do need to keep moving forward here, and it starts a little bit later.
Her name is Thumbelina. Say hello, Thumbelina.
Is the volume up on that?
Yep.
She's very unhappy. What's the matter, Thumbelina? Are you unhappy because you're so little? Huh? Well, that's nothing to make such a sad face about, is it? Here.
Though you're no bigger than my thumb, than my thumb, than my thumb, sweet Thumbelina, don't be glum. No, come. Thumbelina, Thumbelina, tiny little thing. Thumbelina, dance, Thumbelina, sing. Oh, Thumbelina, what's the difference if you're very small? When your heart is full of love, you're 9 feet tall.
Okay, you can take that out now, Darren. Yeah. Very good, though.
Beautiful.
Check out Hans Christian Andersen. Terrific movie. Now we're going into this is the battle. Which is best? We're going down to the wire. White Christmas was not meant to be a Danny Kaye movie. Originally, it was set up so that it was going to be a reunion between Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire. They had already done Holiday Inn. They did Blue Skies. They were going to do this as their third collaboration. When he saw the script, he was not pleased with it, and he backed out. They tried to get Donald O'Connor to be in the movie, but he was involved. He was sick at that point, and he had a flu. He wasn't able to do it. And then they tapped Danny Kaye. Unfortunately, in my estimation, they did not revise the script enough to accommodate Danny Kaye. It still felt like a Fred Astaire script to me, except for this one scene. And I'm hoping we can show it. It's only about 2 minutes, but the scene that you're seeing, that you'll remember, is when they were singing Sisters, and it was Danny and Bing Crosby. And what's interesting about it is this was not meant to be in the movie. During rehearsal, Bing and Danny, at Danny's urging, coaxing, would play around with the soundtrack, and they would mime this, and they started rehearsing it. And the director, Michael Curtiz, said, "You know what? Let's film it and just see. We'll just keep it." It came out so well that it ended up in the movie. Also, if you watch the very end of it, Bing Crosby is uncontrollable, and he's laughing. Because he didn't expect Danny to be whacking him with the fan. You'll see it. Let's do it for them. Okay. White Christmas, Sisters, Danny Kaye and Bing Crosby.
I am going to fast forward.
That's okay.
Am I mad? You don't know between me and my man.
That was real. That was the real Bing Crosby laughing, which I find interesting. Okay, the last movie out of my top 4 Danny Kaye movies is Court Jester. And there are not enough platitudes I can give to this movie about how, you know what, if you've got grandchildren coming over, if you've got, or just for your own edification, it's funny from beginning to end. It's a masterpiece in terms of classic comedy. The Vessel with the Pestle, The Chalice from the Palace is probably what it's most renowned for. But I was doing some research on it. The pellet with the poison in The Vessel with the Pestle, The Chalice from the Palace has a brew that is true, actually did not originate with this movie. If you go to the next slide, there were 2 other movies. Never Say Die with Bob Hope in 1939, and The Southern Yankee with Red Skelton in 1948, and they both had that form of tongue twister that they utilized as a comedy routine. Comics are always boasting or lamenting the fact that, oh, they stole my routine, they stole my gag. You can read these on your own. You can read it as I'm speaking. But my feeling on theft, comedy theft, if you saw Bob Hope doing this in the movie Never Say Die, or Red Skelton doing it in Southern Yankee, both those movies are forgettable. You don't remember those movies. But why do you remember Danny Kaye in The Court Jester? Because they took the premise of doing this tongue twister and they perfected it. They made it better than the other 2. They made it more enjoyable. And if you watch it, they add on to it. They multiply the threat to Danny Kaye. Okay, first he's got to memorize that. Then lightning hits his armor, and he's magnetic. They break the chalice that he's supposed to get, and he has to memorize something else. They just keep compounding the situation over and over again, which makes it even more enjoyable. Okay, those are my top 4 movies. Darren, let's take a survey and see which movie comes in first with our lovely audience. We're going to vote. You're going to vote to see which movie you prefer. Secret Life of Walter Mitty, The Court Jester, Hans Christian Andersen, or White Christmas. Which one do you think is the best Danny Kaye movie? I'd love to know from you which one you find most enjoyable.
Hans Christian Andersen is leading strong, about 47%. White Christmas is behind with 25%. And Court Jester and Secret Life of Walter Mitty, they seem to be sharing about 10% each. Oh, somebody typed in for Hans Christian. Yep. And we even have a number of participants today who have not seen any of them yet.
Wow.
Yet. So you have some wonderful homework ahead of you. These are definitely films you'll want to catch up on.
Start with Court Jester.
Yeah. Yeah.
And White Christmas. And Hans Christian. Well, you know what? Start anywhere you want.
Yeah, the winner seems to be Hans Christian Andersen. That's the one that's taking it. And I know I saw up here, Beverly, she said that she used to listen to the movie on a 45 for many years and loved Thumbelina and intro. Yeah.
Great music in that movie. Absolutely great music. It was none of the music in that movie was written by Sylvia. Everything was written by Frank Lesser, which was a change of pace for Danny. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. We went through Broadway. We went through everything else. Yes, he had his own TV show. It went on from 1963 to 1967. All the top names of show business were there. You can see them all here. There's Lucy and Gene Kelly, Mary Tyler Moore. Oh, the arrow that's pointing, that gentleman that happens to be Harvey Korman. And when the show was canceled, when the show was taken off the air in 1967, he got a phone call from a young comedian by the name of Carol Burnett, who was starting her own show, and he just stepped from this show into the Carol Burnett show, and the rest is television history. But this is where Harvey Korman began with Danny Kaye. I want to go to the next slide because this is more to do with his show. Danny Kaye, the best way to put it, he was colorblind. He did not discriminate in any way, shape, or form, and he welcomed all performers onto his show. Here he is on the bottom left. There's Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Nat King Cole, Mary Wilson, Harry Belafonte. Terrific. And you can see most of their performances together on YouTube. As a matter of fact, I think I put a couple of them there. The one with Danny Kaye and Louis is a classic. It was written by Sylvia. It was featured originally in a movie that Danny and Louis appeared in called The Five Pennies. They recreate that number that they had done many years earlier on the TV show. I don't think we have time to show it, right, Darren?
We need to keep moving. But all of these are on your favorites playlist, right?
I believe so, yes.
If you look for Sal St. George on YouTube, we have on his channel all of his favorite clips from Red Skelton, Danny Kaye, all these chit-chats that we're doing. You can see Sal's favorite clips on there.
Okay, next one, please. So I always talk about some of the great comedians are able to do drama, but it's hard to get a great dramatic actor to do comedy. And here he is opposite none other than Katharine Hepburn. And this was a smaller part, but it was a dramatic part. And he did terrific in this movie, which now we're going to go to the next one. And some of you may know of this movie, others may not. But in 1981, he did this movie about Nazis. And it was a highlight for him to be in this film. Terrific movie. Every once in a while, you'll see it on TCM. But Skokie, check it out. A great dramatic, him fighting the Nazis. It was about the Nazis coming into his hometown here in America, and he fought it. But dramatic actors, they can't do comedy. Comedians can do everything. They can do the comedy, they can do the drama, and Danny is a great example of that. He still was doing comedy. He still appeared on even the Bill Cosby show, playing a doctor on that show. All right, let's move on. I know you want me to move forward. So here's the Danny Kaye School. People were asking about it. This is Public School 149, and they renamed it the Danny Kaye School. He attended Thomas Jefferson High School, but he never graduated. But here's an interesting fact. He was on it. Remember I said in the very top of this, he always wanted to be a doctor? Through his life, he would actually sit in operations in hospitals. He wanted to know all about an operation, how it was conducted, what was going on with the surgery. And he was given an honorary member of the American College of Surgeons and the American Academy of Pediatrics. That's how knowledgeable he was about it. Also, at Hunter College, that's the Danny Kaye Playhouse that was built under his name. And if you go to the next one.
Here, just before we go, Gail said she remembers the school well. She used to go to 149 with her father.
Ah, there you go.
Beverly's granddaughter performs there. My goodness. Lots of memories and connections to Danny Kaye.
Yeah. And you know what? You're in New York and you pass these things, you don't even realize it. The young people that go to the Danny Kaye School, they should be watching one of his movies at least once a month. Okay, let's go to the next slide. At the Culinary Institute, the CIA in Hyde Park, this is the Danny Kaye Theater where they teach the culinary skills. And you can see this is a high-end performance. And they bring in guest lecturers, guest chefs to teach the students, all under the name of the Danny Kaye Theater. Terrific. I'm really thrilled about this one also. I think you can still go to the CIA and have lunches up there. I think they still have that. Okay, and I think we're at the last one. This is Danny, and this is one of his great sayings. I'm just an entertainer. All I want to be is funny. I never aspired to play Hamlet. March 3rd, 1987, he passed away. But thank goodness we have all of his work to keep his memory alive. Terrific performer. Hope you enjoyed hearing about him as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you. I always say this at the end, and I know Darren's going to do a recap at the end, but I always say the same thing. We have no choice about growing older. It happens to all of us. We all have to grow older. We just don't have to grow up. And Danny Kaye is the epitome of that. He never grew up. He was a kid from beginning to end. He kept that child alive inside of him. Take it away, Darren.
So before we go, last week we were very privileged. We got to do a virtual road trip to the Red Skelton Museum. If you would like to see more virtual road trips like that, please let us know. We just launched a poll for that. Also, Dad, we have a request for Carol Burnett. Just bringing her up was enough to draw attention. So they want a Carol Burnett lecture.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any other questions, feel free to type them in right now. Oh, did Danny Kaye die of a medical error?
That I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't know. I'll tell you something funny. This is odd. I was going to recommend a Danny Kaye book, and I went through 3 or 4 of them, and there is no definitive book on Danny Kaye where the authors don't instill their own interpretation of what he was thinking. How do they know what he was thinking? There are all kinds of rumors, sexual rumors about him. There was no proof of any of the things that he said. As a matter of fact, his daughter Dina came out and she lambasted all of them, saying that they're not telling the true story of my father. I guess if you were to read 3 or 4 of the books and then just cull from them the things that are the most accurate in your interpretation, there are certain things you can pull out. But I don't like, we're here to celebrate these people. We're not here to tear them down. And I really refrain from showing any of the dark side of any of the people that we celebrate.
Here we go. I know we're running long here. Somebody's asking if any of these chit chats are archived. Yep, you can see all of them on Sal St. George on YouTube. We keep them up there. Tons of videos, also some clips from theatrical performances that we've done. There is a request. I wonder if we can get, just like we did with George Burns, would we be able to get relatives of Danny Kaye to come on and chat?
I would love to. And that is something that I didn't want to get into it now, but that's something I'm working on right now. Relatives, friends, people that knew. I would love to get Dina. You couldn't do better than to get her. I tried recently to get some of the descendants of Abbott and Costello, and you never know, it may come through, and I'm hoping it does. But yeah, I would love to get more people on that were associated, affiliated, related to these great stars.
We have a good question, and I would like to address it. I know if we're running long, if you need to head out for the day, we understand. That's okay. You can always watch these on YouTube and catch up. But the question here, Brian asked Sal, what is your theory about why so many of the performers back then were so multi-talented, but it's not as common of stars today? So this is a great question. It's worth exploring. What are your thoughts?
You know what? Many of these people really believed in themselves. They believed in their own abilities. And the best example of it was Sammy Davis Jr. And he wrote a book called Yes, I Can. And his theory, and I think this is applicable to everybody we're talking about, his theory was if he went to do a show and they said, by the way, can you do impressions? Oh, yeah, I could do that. Oh, by the way, can you tap dance? Oh, I could do that. By the way, can you sing opera? Oh, I could do it, whatever it was. And then he would go home and he would learn, he would train himself to do it. And I think it's the same thing with these individuals. They were so multi-talented. They push themselves to learn. And sometimes I have a hard time with young people. I don't want to disparage the young actors that we have coming through, but sometimes the classes that they take could be more detrimental than doing it on gut instinct. And I'll give you one quick example. I know we're in a hurry. We had an actor performing in one of our productions in front of a microphone. And as she's standing in front of the microphone, which happens sometimes, the microphone just slid down and she continued singing. Now, naturally, you couldn't hear her, because the microphone slid down. And afterwards, I said to her, why didn't you just pick it up and tighten it up? She said, no, my professor, when I took my acting classes, my singing classes, they said, you never touch the microphone once it's set up. That's being a little extreme. You've got to use your gut instincts when you're putting these programs together. And those are the best. And Darren will say the same thing. He likes people that will fly by the seat of their pants. Brian is out there right now. I know he's listening to this. He's one of those type of actors that it doesn't matter what happens on the stage, just like Darren, he is going to go with it, roll with it, and make it happen, make it work. Nobody in the audience would know there would be a mistake when you have that kind of performer.
Well, I think you're using the correct language. You're saying a performer. There's
Exactly.
a difference. These schools, many schools are not interested in developing performers or entertainers like Danny Kaye. They are grooming actors or a dramatic actor, or they are grooming a dancer or training a musician. It's so specific, and that's wonderful, the specificity of these talents. But when you're looking for this Renaissance man, you're not going to find it coming out of these schools of thought right now. That's just
and closest I can, last word, okay, last word. The closest I could come to that Renaissance man today is Steve Martin. Steve Martin writes, sings, dances, does comedy, does drama. He does it all. Steve Martin is the equivalent of Danny Kaye today.
Who also I really have a great respect for now. I can't think of his name. Wolverine, though. What's his name? Hugh Jackman.
Oh, Hugh Jackman. Yeah.
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
I think he may cut it. I don't think he has comedy on his side, but so many other skills, and I'm really starting to respect that.
Yeah. Yeah, Hugh Jackman is good, but I go with Steve Martin first. Go ahead.
I agree. Okay, we have to wrap this up. Thank you so much for everybody who stuck around for the end here. If you want more, if you want to see more, you can always visit us at salstgeorge.com, and that's where we have our calendar. You can follow us on Facebook if that's where you feel comfortable. We're getting ready for next week with Lucille Ball. We already have a clip posted up there, and as always, you can watch all of these videos at Sal St. George on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye-bye, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy.